So the Gators need to lose the weight of the middleweight. There we go. I put it there, kind of getting creative here. And well, it was not pretty for the Gators in the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. Outscored, as you see it, 75-38 in the middle eight. And usually that's such an important part of a game because you usually get one offensive possession, one defensive possession in the last four, and one offensive possession, one defensive possession in the first four in the second half. So you kind of get to see both sides of the ball right before halftime, right after halftime, and so many swings, so many point swings happen in this area in the middle eight here. So let's go to the top of it. Florida, first game of the season, get the win over Utah. Hey, in the middle eight right there for the Gators, 7-0. 7-0 in the middle, outscoring Utah right there. It was 7-0 in the last four. First four of the second half, 0-0. Gators go out there with the 7-0. So start the season off in the middle eight pretty good there for the Gators. Kentucky Florida started a drive right under 4 minutes. Anthony Richardson does an interception. So the last four, Kentucky won that 7-0. Score up before halftime. First 4 minutes of the second half, Kentucky 3-0. So 10-0 Kentucky in the middle eight. Included USF game here too, since that was close. Right after the Jalen Kimber interception for a touchdown, that drive started with 4:39 left on the clock. USF starts a drive with 3:10 left. And last four of that game, 7-3 Florida. And then the first four of the second half, a Florida interception, USF touchdown, 7-0 USF right there. So because they kicked the field goal in the first half toward the end of the first half, 10-7. USF wins the middle eight of that game. In a close game, Florida comes out, but of course, should not have been that close. Then Tennessee. Florida drive started at 5:09. They punted, Will. Tennessee scores a touchdown in that last four. I think we remember Brenton Cox has Hendon Hooker wrapped up, can't get him down on third down. Tennessee goes on to score a touchdown right before halftime, 7-0 Tennessee right before halftime. And then the first four of the second half, 7-7. Tennessee scored, so 14 points, swing right there for Tennessee. Florida drive took 6 minutes and 21 seconds. They even had to include that. It went past the middle eight there for the Gators, but that drive started pretty early in the second half. 14-7 middle eight win for Tennessee. So far at that point of the season, Florida had been outscored 34-21 in that portion of the season toward the beginning of the season. So we're already telling Florida wasn't doing well going into halftime, out of halftime, putting some points up in some areas, but not able to sustain it throughout the season. Go to Missouri game. Florida drive started with 3:55 left. Anthony Richardson fumbled. Mizzou kicks a field goal. Mizzou gets the last four of the first half, 3-0. First four, 0-0. So, okay, you kept that one close, but Florida's offense not doing anything, as you can tell right here in the middle eight of the portion, middle portion of the game, as Missouri goes 3-0. In the next game, 14-0 LSU in the middle eight. LSU drive started with 4:05, touchdown LSU. Florida drive afterwards fails. So the last four of the first half, 7-0 LSU. First four, another 7-0 LSU. I mean, 14-0. You're outscored 51-21 in the middle eight of this section so far of this part of the season. And then it's kind of to round it out, not much happening as far as the action goes. Georgia, last four, they put up a touchdown in the last four of the first half, 7-0 Georgia. First four, Florida scored in the first four of the second half, 7-7 tie. A&M, also 7-7 tie. South Carolina, 0-0. And you can kind of get picky there, Will, if you wanted to. South Carolina's drive started with just over 6 minutes left, but they scored on that fake punt. So that was late in the first half. They get that. But it was 0-0, no drives really starting late first half, and no points early second half. Vanderbilt, it was tied 7-7 in the middle eight. FSU tied 3-3 in the middle eight. It was 75-38. Florida outscored in the middle eight. Well, I mean, we've seen Dan Mullen was big on getting that score right before halftime go into the locker room, get the ball after halftime, and go put up another, make that 14-point swing. That happened a lot in that 2020 season there for the Gators, getting some points right before halftime, right after halftime. And look, we go back and look at these games and we say, why did Florida struggle so much in some of these games? Why did they lose so many of the games? And we can pinpoint to this. Did Billy Napier trust Anthony Richardson to go put together a 2-minute drive? Was Anthony Richardson able to? Did he have trust in himself? Did he have trust in the offense? Was he able to put together a 2-minute drive? But erase all that, Will. We saw too many times this team just come out flat to start the second half, come out of the locker room and just not get anything going, whether it be offense or defense. But this mainly the offense is as many points as they scored in a lot of these games this year, they still struggled right before halftime, right after halftime.
Yeah, I mean, this specifically, I think, is why people really are concerned about Napier at this point, right? Like you look at it and say, we were expecting a guy who's an experienced head coach, who's going to be able to make those adjustments, who's going to be able to make consistent decisions that lead to success in the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second. And look, I mean, that's a half a quarter, but 75-38, that scoring margin is a 2-10 team over a 12-game period. And so you think about Florida ending up 6-7. Well, they probably lost a game. So the calculation I have has them at 6.1 wins and going 6-6 basically on their scoring differential for this year. If you subtract these numbers, basically if they just played this even, they would have won 6.9 games. So it's one game specifically that over the course of the year that they would have won. But you look at all the one-score games, right? They were 3-3 in one-score games. Do you end up going 5-1 in one-score games? Do you end up with one-score games that aren't one-score games because you're able to pull away? All those sorts of things. You look at it, LSU was a one-score game.
Missouri was the one. Remember,
Florida State was a one-score game. Missouri was a one-score game.
Yeah, Missouri game where you look like they were able to pull away multiple times and just was never able to.
Yeah, Tennessee, USF, those were all one-score games. And Kentucky was almost a one-score game. They basically gave them a field goal at the end to prevent it from being a one-score game. Even the Utah game was a one-score game, right? And you look at it, and I mean, geez, I'm watching Utah play in the Rose Bowl, and I felt like the guy for Bull Durham who's like, how did we win 8? Like when he says they're 8-16. It's like I'm watching them, and I'm like, did we knock out Rising? And I just didn't know it. Like, how did we win that game? And the answer is because they didn't put themselves at a significant deficit going into halftime and then coming out of halftime. In fact, they got a huge benefit from the Anthony Richardson run that set up or that scored the touchdown there at the end of the half. And then, in the second half, Utah drives all the way down the field and they get the goal line stop. And so those two things combined to sort of make Florida be in the net positive coming in and out of halftime. And there was no other time the entire year looking at this chart where they were net positive. There were a couple where they're net neutral, but very few of them where they were net neutral, actually. And yeah, I know Dave Wonderlick talked a little bit about, Napier was so busy putting his finger in holes of the dam, and sort of as the year progressed, things got a little bit better. I guess you can see that in the South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Florida State games if you wanted to say glass is half empty. But, geez, out of a 12-game schedule, you ought to at least win a couple in that 8-minute period. And Florida just didn't. Now, a big part of that is the defense couldn't get stops on either side either, right? And so when your defense can't stop anybody, it's hard to call timeouts. I mean, he called timeouts against Tennessee and was aggressive and got burned by that. He called timeouts against Kentucky and tried to run his 2-minute offense, and Richardson made him pay for that. And then there were other games where he just sort of sat on the ball going into halftime, and no one was real happy with that either. Now, the issue I have isn't people being unhappy with him being unaggressive or the lack of success when he was being aggressive. The issue I have is that sometimes he was aggressive and sometimes he wasn't. And to be honest, especially after that Tennessee game, you knew what you had in that defense and you just need to plan accordingly. And I loved the way he coached the Tennessee game. I came out of that Tennessee game so encouraged that he was taking chances on fourth downs. He was going for 2-point conversions, that he was going for it on fourth down all the time. Like that sort of stuff, that aggressiveness, I think would have served him well over the course of the year. And to be honest, I think he changed tacks for whatever reason. I don't exactly know. Maybe it was the criticism. Maybe he just, wasn't comfortable playing that way. But, if he'd have played that way against LSU, if he'd have played that way against Georgia, if he'd played that way against Vanderbilt and Florida State, I think Florida pulls out at least one more of those wins. But look, I mean, if you're looking for a place for Florida to improve, this is it. And I don't know. Like, I don't suspect that the other team is going in and making these massive adjustments that take advantage of something schematically that Florida's doing. I mean, the fact that you just said it, that they came out flat. Even the South Carolina game, right? I mean, they came out and the defense looked like they were about to give stuff up and were able to get some turnovers, but the turnovers sort of stopped drives real early on. Then the offense just sort of sat on it. And, there was an opportunity to win that game by 60, and instead, it ends up being a comfortable win, obviously, but not as good as it could have been. I think that's sort of the story of the year, right? Florida was really inconsistent all year long, and I think that inconsistency really reared its ugly head when everybody had a chance to sort of rest and reset, and then when the other team came out and had reset, Florida wasn't ready and just got demolished, especially on the back end of that middle eight.
Yeah. So one that goes probably a little bit towards game management, but also, as we say, trying to find out ways to get this team up coming out of halftime.
Want more Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month, get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat room, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to gatorsbreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today.